Hey everyone, I'm Nathan, and today I'm going to be talking about the Aasimar, a fantasy race in 5th edition's Dungeons & Dragons. The Aasimar are sort of like the angelic equivalent of tieflings. So tieflings are an extremely popular, playable race inside D&D. They're known for being really cool and sexy and mischievous, normally depicted with red skin and horns. The reason for these features are because they are descendants of actual demons and devils. The Aasimar, however, aren't so lucky. In a lot of the official art, they aren't even depicted with wings. As a dungeon master, I find this incredibly frustrating because whenever one of my players comes to me and says, oh, I want to play as an Aasimar, they immediately get frustrated with the fact that typically what that means is they want wings and they want to be able to fly. And I just think it's weird because we already have the Aarakocra, which have wings and can fly, and they're kind of balanced that they can't wear heavy armor. I always just homebrew it for them. So in this illustration, I demonstrate what I think the Aasimar can look like to make them more iconic, focusing on wings and also an eye motif, which I'll get into later. So without further ado, let's get into the video. 3, 2, 1. I started out with a bunch of sketches to sort of get my mind rolling, and I really wanted to lean in on the biblically accurate angel motifs. So biblically accurate angels are completely terrifying. The most famous one that I can think of are these angels called the wheels, and they are these forever spinning, forever rotating, like several wheels that are completely made out of eyeballs, and they are all rotating and spinning around a center eyeball that's both an eyeball and constantly singing very loudly the praises of God. You can find drawings of this on the internet. It's kind of a meme, and these images as a little kid always scared the living daylights out of me. I'd always just saw them as so unsettling, and I think it's really weird that they freaked me out more than demons did, because it's like the whole idea is that demons were angels cast out of heaven, and so now they're ugly, but I would rather be ugly than mind-breakingly terrifying. So yeah, that's where you're gonna see a lot of eyeball motifs kind of popping up in these images. So I made 3 different figures, a femme, a mask, and then a non-binary person, and then I had a bonus girl just in the background for fun, but I wanted to show different ways of approaching an Aasimar character. So with the eyeball, I feel like D&D could really lean into this more for the next edition of Dungeons & Dragons. Like so many descriptions of biblically accurate angels are, they have multiple wings that are covered in eyes. So I draw a bunch of really hot people, I give them cute outfits, I give them all wings, and I give them eyes on different parts of their bodies. I would love if Aasimar had some sort of ability, not true sight, because I think true sight is way too OP, but either like they can see farther away, or besides just having like dark vision, if there was some sort of boost to vision, because they have eyes all over their bodies. So something like maybe they have advantage on being blinded or something, or maybe that they can't be blinded. That might be too OP too. But something that has to do with sight, I think that would be a cool thing to give them. Obviously a flying, it just makes sense. I despise how they have these like spectral wings that appear so that they can only fly for like 10 minutes or an hour. I don't remember which one it is, but once they're like a high enough level, like if my player has wings, they should just be able to fly, and that should just be something that they can do innately because they're playing people, or just to show that Aasimar can be really hot and really cool and attractive just as much as the tieflings can be. And I also played with like the multiple wings trope. So the woman on the right only has 2 wings and is a little more normal looking. I think the girl in the back is the most normal looking, as she just has wings and no eyes. But I also gave her like 1 eyeball on her hand, so there's like a little bit of an off-putting nature to her. And then with the man on the left of the screen, you know, I gave him the eye in the middle of his forehead, but I also, instead of giving him ears, I gave him wings on the side of his head. They're like a softer version of horns. Like, horns are cool, but there's something very cute about it. It suited this like himbo I was designing very well. And then in the background, the person in the back I imagine is more like non-binary, and I made them more mysterious. I gave them very gothic features just to show that there's a range of what they could look like. Like, they don't have to strictly be these goody two-shoe characters. They can also be much darker. So I gave them 6 wings that are much smaller, but I like to imagine that when they fly, they like suddenly in a very uncanny uncanny and almost unnatural way grow, and that's what causes them to be able to fly. And I also gave this big hat with this one giant eyeball on it that I thought was pretty cool. The very first time I ever had a player use an Aasimar was really early in my DMing journey. We were running a very simple one-shot, and really none of us knew how D&D worked yet. We were all still kind of learning the basics. So I looked up a bunch of fantasy races that I thought were interesting. I wrote down a whole bunch of them, and I just kind of cut them up and put them in a hat. And so everybody drew a class, a race, and a magic item out of like these 3 different hats that we had to play as. And it was really fun because my friend who got the Aasimar made them like this really scary, twisted character who was like almost very demonic in the way they talked. They were very dark, and she really leaned into like the fallen angel kind of motif. And I just thought that was so interesting. And then the whole little one shot was basically them going inside a haunted house and figuring out why is it haunted and how do we escape. And it was really cool to have this angel kid going from room to room with this like very dark and dreary and otherworldly quality to how they spoke. It added such a unique flavor compared to the other kids. And there was also this natural outcast nature to the Aasimar kid that was a little different than the tiefling. I feel like with tieflings, they're kind of excluded and marginalized because people think they're bad luck. They're obviously very scary. People think and associate them with demonic energy and curses. But I feel like there would be somewhat of an opposite effect for the Aasimar, that whenever they would appear, people would be like idolizing you. And when people put you up on a pedestal, that also is somewhat of a way of separating and othering you. And I think it can be damaging to your psyche as well, especially if you're just a kid and you were just born to be constantly told like you're chosen and heavenly, divined. And I can imagine it would make some very weird, twisted psychologies, which actually brings me to the second time one of my players wanted to be an Aasimar. So after that one shot, we started our first campaign, which was pirate themed. And it was really interesting because it actually started out as a small party. So there were only 3 players and they were just kind of going along. And as we were playing from week to week, another group of our friends were like, oh, you guys play Dungeons and Dragons? I've always wanted to play. Can we join in? So we were like, of course you can play. It's pirate themed. Go ahead and make your own characters. I showed them a bunch of art for like what they could be. And one of them gravitated towards some art that I showed them of an Aasimar. So this player, she was also really drawn to the Aasimar as a character. The woman sitting on the hay bales actually looks very similar to how I imagined that character kind of looked like. But she was much more of a traditional what you think of when you think of an angel. Beautiful big white wings instead of the dark gothic wings that my first player kind of embraced. Very beautiful, very otherworldly and ethereal. And her backstory was really interesting because she was like kidnapped and raised by cultists who kind of worshipped her and viewed her as closer to the gods. And they all believed that she was supposed to be this divine messenger. So after she escaped from these cultists, the number one thing she values in her life is freedom and not being controlled or manipulated. Whenever anyone's like, oh, Aasimar aren't as interesting as tieflings, they're not rich with storytelling baked into them, the only thing they're good for are like fallen Aasimar, oathbreaker paladins, I completely reject that. I think that they're extremely interesting and weird and just as capable as telling these really great stories. And I think like Yasha or Rini from Critical Role kind of show this in a really great way, that there are multiple ways of having ASMR and having them be cool. And I just want to see more art of them, and I want more people to play as them. And yeah, with that pretty much brings us to the end of this video. And I gotta say, what do y'all think of the Aasimar? Do you have any funny stories of wanting to play as one but being unsettled or unsatisfied with them? Like not being able to fly? My DMs out there, what do you think of the ASMR? Do you hate it whenever your players can't fly? I don't really have a problem with it, but I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Anyway, this was a lot of fun, and I think I might make this a series on my channel where I just kind of go through all of the D&D races and talk about how I play them in my home game, what my thoughts are, how they exist in the worlds that I build. As always, my name is Nathan. I upload every Wednesday and Saturday, and I'll see you all real soon. Bye!